What if the future leaders in your organization don't have leadership titles yet? What if they are not even on your hypo list? Today, we are breaking down how organizations can truly identify leadership potential beyond titles, tenure, and traditional frameworks. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Xobin Talks, where we explore the future of work, talent strategy, HR transformation, and actionable insights from leaders shaping modern HR practices. I'm your host, Nikita, and today we are joined by a distinguished HR leader with over 10 years of global experience across e commerce, digital media, technology consulting, and staffing. He has played pivotal roles in building talent development functions from scratch, driving talent transformation, performance and career management, and HR businesses partnering across organizations and regions. Currently serving as Global Head of Learning and Leadership Development Enterprise Solution at PageGroup. It's a pleasure to welcome Mr. Akshay Chopra. Hello, Akshay. Welcome to Xobin Talks. It's great to have you here. To begin, could you please introduce yourself and briefly walk us through your HR journey?
Sure, Nikita. Pleasure to be here, firstly, and thanks for a wonderful introduction. My name is Akshay Chopra. I'm currently based out of the UK in the London office for PageGroup. I work as their global head of learning and leadership development. It's been a long journey to get to this point. I come from India, as Nikita already knows. I've been with Page for the last 7 years. I joined them as a recruiter based in their Gurgaon office. Helped manage to get some amazing talent into the business first. 3 years doing talent acquisition. I then went into my first love now, which is learning and development. And it's been 4 years into that business. Have built a lot of businesses alongside, which is around building their learning philosophies, their learning journeys. I began my journey with Page outsourcing when I moved to the UK, a completely blank slate, not knowing where to head to, but yes, definitely with a passion to build something within the learning world. And where I am today is the enterprise solutions, which I call the next big kid for Page Group. And we're looking at building one of our largest clients and helping them in their learning and development journey.
Good to know you, Akshay. Akshay, when you think about future leaders long before someone gets a leadership title, what early signs do you personally look for in terms of skills or behavior?
Great question, Nikita. Actually, I think I've been thinking about this one. I think for me, the biggest early signal is ownership without authority. I generally look for people who step into problems that technically aren't theirs, who connect dots across teams, and who really care deeply about their outcomes, right? It's not just about individual success at the end of the day. I think behavior wise, Nikita, I think curiosity really stands out for me. Yeah, future leaders ask better questions, they seek feedback continuously. They also reflect on what they could do differently next time, right? So, across the industries that I've had experience, the strongest early leaders I've seen are also extremely adaptable. They don't panic when things change, they tend to experiment things.
That's interesting, especially the point about learning. At Zabin, we often see organizations trying to capture these early signals using psychometric assessments that evaluates adaptability, critical thinking, and leadership orientation much before someone is promoted. So it seems like the intent is to spot behavior before outcomes, not after. So let's move on to the next question, Akshay. Traditionally, organizations have relied heavily on manager judgment or tenure to identify leaders. From your experience, how effective is this approach today, especially when compared to more structured, data backed methods?
Yeah, interesting one, no? I think manager judgment and tenure, they both bring context as well as lived experiences, but they're on their own, they're quite risky, right? So, as I said, they're subjective, they're inconsistent, and they're often biased towards visibility rather than capability, in my opinion. Yeah. So let's look at tenure first, right? So tenure, especially, I would say, is a weak proxy. Time served doesn't equal readiness. Some people grow fast, others plateau. I've seen incredible first time leaders with very little tenure outperform safe, long tenure choices, for instance. But let's look at structured, data-backed approaches, right, which help bring balance. Yeah. So you mentioned skill assessments, you mentioned behavioral data. Multi-rater feedback, in my opinion, really adds objectivity and something around pattern recognition. So I think these surface potential that might otherwise be invisible to organizations, yeah, especially for quieter, high performers or underrepresented groups. I think just to summarize, I think the sweet spot is combining both. Yeah, using data to challenge assumptions and manager insight to add nuances wherever possible. And I think when the two align, confidence goes up in future leaders, future budding managers. And when they don't, that's usually when the most interesting development conversations happen, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, we have noticed something similar. Managers' nominations often reflect visibility and familiarity, not always potential. That's where structured inputs like psychometric insights, role fit indicators, and behavioral data start adding balance. So let's move on to the next question. When evaluating future leaders, how do you personally balance behavior indicators like adaptability, collaboration, decision making with hard skills? Are they equally important or does one outweigh the other at different stages?
Thanks, Nikita. I think they're both important in my opinion, yeah, but they play very different roles. I think hard skills often get someone noticed early, especially in specialist heavy industries such as tech or recruitment, where I worked in. But behaviors are what determine whether someone really sustains leadership success, yeah. What I've seen consistently is that hard skills are easier to train than behaviors. You can upskill someone on systems or domain knowledge fairly quickly, and shifting mindset, emotional intelligence, or even how someone shows up ambiguously. Right? So that takes much more intentional work. So that's why when assessing future leaders, my biggest recommendation is that I prioritize behaviors, and those behaviors could be adaptability, decision making under uncertainty, collaboration, self awareness. I think these are the skills that matter the most as roles become more complex, also with AI coming up. That said, context matters. Yeah, leadership in a high growth tech scale up looks very different from leadership in a regulated environment. So it's not about just choosing one over the other, it's about weighing them based on future role demands and not just current success.
Yeah, that makes sense. We often see organizations as skills in isolation, technical tests here and soft skills there. But leadership readiness usually sits at the intersection of ability, behavior, and mindset. So let's move on to the next question. With the rise of HR tech and people analytics, HR teams now have access to performance data, skills data, and behavioral insights. So, how can HR teams use this data responsibly to make more confident leadership decisions without overwhelming themselves?
Yeah, a question I get asked a lot these days, Anikita. The biggest shift I'm personally seeing is moving from what I call static snapshots to something of dynamic signals. Yeah, what does that mean? So instead of one off assessments, HR teams can today look at patterns over time. It could be performance trends, it could be skill acquisition, it could be feedback loops, even learning behavior, for instance. Yeah, data becomes powerful when it answers real questions, right? Something such as who's growing fastest, who adapts well to change, who consistently elevates team performance, or that's far more useful than a single score, in my opinion. But at the same time, data shouldn't replace judgment, in my opinion. It should sharpen it further. The best HR teams I've worked with use analytics to ask better questions. They don't label people permanently. There's also a piece around responsibility, isn't it? Transparency matters. When employees understand how data is used and see it as driving fairer, more objective decisions, trust naturally goes up in organizations and within people. So ultimately, data helps HR move from I think to we are seeing, which is a huge credibility shift, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And structure makes all the difference. We have seen HR teams gain clarity when multiple data points are combined. Psychometric signals, skills, readiness, and multi rater feedback rather than relying on a single metric. So, yes, let's move on to the next question, Akshay. Once someone is spotted as future leadership material, what should organization do next? How do they ensure development actually keep pace with potential? instead of stopping at identification.
Yeah, I think this is the place where most organizations drop the ball. Yeah, identifying potential is only step one, in my opinion. Development has to be intentional, it has to be personalized, and really tied to real work that we're intending to do. Yeah, high potentials don't need generic leadership programs done. They need stretch experiences, they need exposure, and also they need coaching. Yeah, given that there are problems to solve and there are heavy problems to solve in organizations, it shouldn't be just content which they should be consuming per se. um, I'm a big believer in development in the flow of work, cross functional projects, acting roles, leading through change. I think that's where real learning happens for budding leaders. Formal learning supports that, but it shouldn't be the centerpiece. Equally important, I feel, is feedback. High potentials grow fastest when they get honest, frequent input, not just once a year or twice a year. We need to make it much more continuous in nature. Yeah, we need to normalize that potential isn't a guarantee. It's something to be tested, it's something to be supported and revalidated over a period of time.
Yeah, that's powerful, Akshay. Identification without development can actually be risky. And this is where continuous feedback loops like 360-degree evaluation combined with targeted development plans can prevent leadership stagnation. So let's move on to the next question. We are currently working with 5,000 plus teams, and around 600 of them use us for psychometric testing, while 180 plus use 360 degrees evaluation. Over the last 5 years, we have seen a fairly fixed hypo template: 360-degree survey plus psychometric test plotted on a 9 box model. High potential is typically defined as someone who performs well and scores well on assessments. My question to you is, how do organizations know they are not just creating an echo chamber? Is there a better or alternative way to approach hypo identification?
Yeah, really good question. And also, I feel it's so important and topical as a subject today. So, I think the risk with fixed templates such as assessments, 360s, 9 box grids, like you mentioned, it's that they often reward people who already look like leaders today, not the leaders you'll need tomorrow. So, echo chambers actually form when the same traits are reinforced repeatedly, especially if success profiles aren't refreshed. So, you end up amplifying confidence, visibility, or cultural similarity rather than true potential. So, a better approach from my angle is to diversify the signals, look at growth trajectories, not just current performance. I'd say track learning agility, track adaptability, and how people perform in new or ambiguous situations. I also think high potential identification should be fluid, not a once and done label. People move in and out of potential as roles, life stages, and business needs change, and which happen also quite frequently these days, right? Finally, I'd say challenge the system regularly. Yeah, ask what's missing, whose potential might we be overlooking. When HR teams do that intentionally, high potential programs become far more future focused and far more equitable in nature.
That's powerful and great insight, especially the need to look beyond static frameworks. What we are hearing more often is the need to move away from static hypo labels toward dynamic potential scoring, where leadership readiness evolves around time instead of being fixed once a year. All right, Akshay, let's wrap up with a quick rapid fire round. Short answers, first thought that comes to your mind. One leadership quality organizations often overlook:
Ooh, interesting one. I think empathy.
data or experience, which matter more in spotting future talents.
I think a balance of both matters, and I think context matters.
One underrated metric in talent evaluation.
Hmm. Coachability.
One mistake organizations make while building leadership pipelines.
Rushing.
One piece of advice for HR leaders to identify and develop future leaders effectively.
Please listen deeply.
Great, Akshay. So that was incredibly insightful, Akshay. Thank you so much for sharing your practical perspective on leadership identification and development. And to our listeners, if you have any questions, you can write to us or you can connect directly with Akshay. We will attach his LinkedIn profile in the description. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts on this podcast.